put in place.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today's special presidential election debate, discussion, analysis. We are live here on Elevate TV. We're going to give you an interesting discussion here today. We felt that it is important for us to also dive into the big conversation. Today is a big day. The front-runner candidates are going to be facing each other on a very serious debate. Of course, we hope that both candidates will be on the set in the next few minutes, in an hour's time or slightly less, at 8 o'clock. So we felt that we want to get into this debate and have put together a panel of, analysts here and panelists here, some wonderful gentlemen and two ladies. These are very interesting and well educated. They are all lawyers apparently, and so welcome, two ladies and gentlemen, to today's conversation. So today I want us to have a kind of, before the top two candidates come on national television and begin to answer questions and discuss, lay out their maybe elaborate a little bit more on the manifestos that have already been published, and of course be subjected to a battery of questions. This is a national debate. This is a big national debate, and we need to dive into this conversation. So maybe we can start off by, first of all, just hearing from you. What do you think about this debate? What do you think this debate is all about? Just off your head, and we can start right here on my right. You can also just quickly introduce yourself and say what you think is the big agenda for you on this particular debate.
My name is Annabel Njoki, advocate of the High Court of Kenya, also candidate for the position of Member of Parliament, Kabete constituency, on a ticket of the Service Party. I think key issues coming up for this debate is, one, the economic situation. A lot of Kenyans are very concerned about the issue of having money in their pockets. There's also the element of food insecurity, which goes hand in hand with climate change. And there's also the question of our infrastructural development and what impact it has on our economic capacity as a country.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you very much. So the big debate is the economy and other associated issues like climate change and stuff like that. All right, very good. My friend Mimi, you've been on this set before. Tell us, just introduce yourself very briefly to our audience and tell us what you think the big issues are on this particular debate.
Okay, thank you so much for having us, Gigi. My name is Mimi Aldrin. I am the managing partner at ANC Advocates in Nairobi. For me, the bigger issues are corruption, of course, and then the aspects of healthcare, and then housing and land. Definitely. I would say those would be, and security as well, the security of the people. Mm-hmm. Those would be my top ticket items that I expect the candidates to address this evening. Okay. Yeah.
Very good, very good. And I have someone that has not been on Elevate TV before, a young lawyer, and I think you represent the young people, and you are welcome. And just briefly introduce yourself, and so that we get this debate underway, and tell us for you what's the big thing, what one thing that these guys should not miss to bring on the table.
All right. Thank you very much for the invite, Gigi. My name is Kerio. I am managing partner at KK and Associates Law, and also a government and policy practitioner. I think I'll agree with my learned colleagues that corruption, the economic stimulus, is a question. But I think for me, the greatest issue in this election would be how far have we come as far as addressing and meeting the questions of cohesion. Because I think one of the key things that is going to be tested during this particular engagement is how far have Kenyans come as far as dealing with the aspect of cohesion, peace building, and actually their resilience as a country. And I think one of the key things that need to come out clearly from these particular candidates is how do they intend to make sure that the center holds even after this particular election process. So I think that's something that I really look forward to hearing from each of the particular candidates.
All right. Very good. So, ladies and gentlemen, those of you that are following us on the various social media platforms, we are live on Elevate TV Kenya, Elevate TV Kenya, Facebook, YouTube. We are live. Please share with your friends. Send in your comments. Tell us what you think. There is a number on the screen that is running. You can actually send a text, and we can. Maybe you have a question. You have a comment. You could tell us maybe this debate shouldn't even be happening. Or you could tell us, yes, I wish that these people can address this particular matter. I think this issue must be on the table. And we hope that the journalists that are at the forefront of asking the questions will ask those questions. However, we are part of this conversation. We are part of this big conversation. And we're going to be bringing you the actual debate live after this pre-debate discussions and analysis here. We're going to send you straight to the actual debate. You will have it live on Elevate TV, so don't go away, and so follow this conversation. So now I think you have an idea of the panel I have here. These are an amazing group of lawyers. Most of lawyers. I love lawyers because these are guys who really think hard about matters. But Annabelle Joki here is actually a candidate for a parliamentary position. So if you get when you get elected for the Kabete parliamentary seat and you go to parliament, whoever will be the president, I'm sure there are things like you have mentioned. I think you've mentioned health. I think you mentioned health. Economy, of course. Economy is the big thing. I think we can start with the economy because that's a big issue. So let's ask ourselves the big question. What must these guys address as far as our economy is concerned? And what are we getting wrong? Or are we just fine? It's only that we are going as a nation through a rough patch and we'll stabilize. So where do you see this whole nation heading from an economic point of view?
From an economic point of view, one, what are we getting wrong? The rain started beating us when we deviated from Kibaki's plan. Mm-hmm. Kibaki's plan, in as far as our borrowing, was this: that there was no time Kenya would borrow money that is more than 50% of our GDP.
Okay.
If you're looking at a balance sheet, the GDP is basically like the balance sheet of the country. Okay. So that now, if say our debtors were to come collect, mm-hmm. they would only get half of the country, which leaves you with half that you can use to rebuild. But now, we changed from that to having a debt ceiling, which we have seen Parliament consistently push, mm-hmm. because what is happening is 3/4 of the revenue we are collecting is going towards settling of debts. So when we budget, we're left with a deficit. Okay. Now, how do you meet this deficit? You either borrow locally from our commercial banks, or you borrow externally from the IMFs and what have you.
Okay. So as you answer this, by the way, I want you guys to be interjecting. So it's not a monologue, right?
Yes.
So it's not a monologue. So if you think that what she is saying is wrong, just tell her, no. I think Annabelle, there is more than that. So let's engage. Let's not let Annabelle get away with anything she says that you don't agree with. Yes. So the debt ceiling issue. Parliament has been playing ball with the executive and approving every time they are told, please push up the ceiling. They go sit down and approve. So I guess maybe you can't blame the president for ballooning debt, because after all, Parliament has been approving. So, and they are representative of the people. So Kenyans actually have okayed the government to borrow.
I think
technically, yeah.
I think I'd like to address that very categorically. Mm-hmm. There is a difference between the proper utilization of delegated responsibility, mm-hmm. and that distinction must be drawn from a situation of state capture of legislative authority. It has been very clear and without fear of any contradiction that we have had the most lame duck of a parliament that we've ever experienced since 1963, where a National Assembly and a Senate has failed to actually safeguard and protect the interests of the small man in this country. And that is solely and squarely on the ambit of the executive, which has actually played a very strong-handed position in this particular aspect. And I'll actually put this ball on Annabelle's court that when she's sworn in as a member of parliament for Kabete, then she has an obligation to ensure that the duty to serve and to protect the constitution is actually upheld. Regardless, and this is where the fear and favor comes in, because there might not be favor, but there's a lot of fear as far as dealing with this executive has actually been concerned. So in my opinion, I think we have to, one, be very keen on which people we're sending to the legislature, where their loyalties. Are they to the people? Are they to the executive? Are they to themselves? So that when we want to address the question of how best is the interest of the small man served, then we will be able to weigh on those particular skills.
And just to add on that, I think sustainable development vis-a-vis sustainable use of resources is very, very important. It is the same legislature that's guilty of corruption and therefore unsustainable use of resources. Corruption is just one way of unsustainable use of resources. When we're talking about the economy, we cannot evade the topic of unsustainable use of resources and unsustainable development. We cannot be talking about heavy borrowing and without talking about heavy expenditure and heavy questionable expenditure at that. We've had leaders talking about traveling when you can have a Zoom call. In this day and age, let's talk about that in this new dispensation. So yeah.
And in addition to that, part of the roles of a member of parliament are accountability, which means you can summon a cabinet secretary or any government officer and question them on why they are not fulfilling their mandate in the manner that they are supposed to. So yes, as legislature, you have approved the increasing of the debt ceiling. Now, after having acquired that debt, the money has not been utilized in the manner that it was envisioned to be utilized. And then you fold your hands instead of summoning those people to the house and asking them, why was this money not used in the manner that it was supposed to? Because at the end of the day, Kenyan taxpayers are the ones who are going to bear the brunt of this debt. So if you're going to be remitting monies to settle a debt, at the very least, those monies need to have done something that is serving you as the Kenyan taxpayer.
So and that's really the point of, so as far as the issue of the economy is concerned, so I think you raised the issue of the debt. Debt is a big issue. It's a big monster. But we are at that point where, and I want you guys to speak into this, and whether you think, okay, so there is this whole issue of, is this debate about what whoever wins the election must do to, you kind of like resuscitate the economy, you kind of fix the mess right now. I think what I've been hearing is that, the current regime has completely messed up the economy, and the two main candidates have been saying, no, look, once you elect me, I'll fix the economy. And in terms of even talking about 100 days, we've just had the first, the lower tier debate, which was basically a monologue. David Mwaure was all alone, and he had his own 1.5 hour of fame. And he had a lot of wonderful things to say. And he's very, very clear about what he want to do. Do you think that we need to get a real solid answer of what shall be done in the first 100 days? Is that the focus? What do you think these candidates should address themselves, like in terms of getting us from where we are to where we need to do, or fixing something? Yeah, so that's the bit of fixing. What do you think these guys should fix?
I think the very first thing we should be thinking about is what is the track record of this person vis-a-vis anything that they're going to say. Because what I'm going to say about the next 100 days is based on my strong point. We've had Raila's strong point is industrialization. He's built on it. We know what the other strong points are. We don't want to sound like we're playing favorites, but some people are talking about marijuana, and other people are talking about, the bottom-up economy model. What is your track record vis-a-vis your strong point? Because from there on, we can now pick up what is actually achievable and attainable within the next 100 days. Remember, 100 days is a very short period of time
Absolutely.
to alleviate corruption or to deal with land issues of title deeds or to deal with housing. We have to be very practical. Is it healthcare? What is the very immediate issue? Is it food insecurity? Is it the security of your people? So what they have to pick out is a strong point based on their track record. Otherwise, they're going to get it wrong.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so you think that when it comes to the first 100 days, perhaps these guys should tell us what they're going to do about, say, for example, food, the food crisis that we are facing right now, very high prices. By the way, maybe you guys should speak into this. I know people have been talking about these high food prices, commodity prices.
Yeah.
They're very essential one. Fuel, cooking oil, unga. The other day there was a moratorium on unga. Now we can get unga for 100 bob. Maybe you should say whether that is somebody has jumped the gun, you know, and fix the problem so that the countries have nothing to fix.
I think I'd just like to throw us back to what Annabelle had started with. And I think, what do we need to plug first? And I think one of the things that this particular regime and the next regime will have a very, very clear, their job clearly cut out for them, is basically reconstituting the institutional confidence that Kenyans have had as far as the economic models are concerned. Because if you review the Azimio la Uchumi, you review the bottom-up model, you also review Wajakoya's marijuana plan to actually plant and pay the Chinese, plant the weed on the expressway and see if they can be able to pay the national debt. You will realize that all of them have coined a very clear path on paper.
Yes.
But the difference usually is, a joke is told that in Kenya, if you were to ask different nationalities different questions, a Kenyan will first form a commission of inquiry before solving the question of why the chicken crossed the road.
All right.
So we have gotten to a level where we are good at face value responses, face value paper. Because if you read this, and with all due respects to the drafters, if you read these manifestos side by side, take the Code Coalition manifesto and the TNA manifesto as it were, they are actually an exact copy and paste of each other. So it means we are not short of ideas, we're not short of building systems. What we are short of is political will to implement defeating corruption, implement absolute industrialization to build our income base, and also just build that confidence that, look, we are at this point from an economic perspective, and if we implement this particular model, 100 days is not realistic from where I sit, but if we implement this particular model responsibly, then we can actually get to this point as a progressive point.
Absolutely, absolutely. Again, maybe we can go back to the issue of confidence, because I think that's an issue that even if no question will be asked about confidence, I think Kenyans will have to judge the two front runners, I think in terms of the confidence they have in these two people. I know, you know, in terms of voters are currently kind of divided. You know, the opinion polls are showing that you know, each side has its own really, like the coalition, the votes, you know, the numbers, so to speak. So I think the question is maybe the issue of confidence. Are these candidates who are presenting themselves tonight really a symbol of confidence? And maybe that's something. Annabelle, what do you think?
From my interaction with my constituents, these candidates actually, Kenyans don't really have a lot of confidence in them. And if we're to go back to what you said about Kimwarer having a monologue, we are about to get into a second session of the presidential debate, and there's a very high likelihood of us having a second monologue. So the first question I have is, what is the rationale behind separating the presidential candidates, in as much as they were saying we're looking at the percentages and what have you? Because the reality is, Kimwarer does not have the economic muscle that William Ruto has and that Raila has. He also does not have the kind of financial backing that the two have. So naturally, you would expect that he would fall short on certain aspects. But had he perhaps been placed on the same platform as the other two, he may have raised issues or points that would have resonated with Kenyans, and would have perhaps seen his percentage increasing. I think whatever the Media Council of Kenya has done is a shortcoming, because they have deprived Kenyans a chance to have all candidates on the same platform addressing these issues, and then we even see them throwing various questions at each other. So in terms of confidence, there's a question of, one, do they really meet the threshold of Article 10 in terms of questions of transparency, accountability, integrity, name it. There's also the question of, like he referred to, previous manifestos. We're dealing with two frontrunners who have been in previous governments. You started your term with promises. At the end of that term, what percentage of your promises had you achieved?
Okay, yeah, and I think those questions will come up. We hope that the panelists, that are going to be asking questions that are going to raise those two issues. What the track record issue. Do you think that's a big deal? Track record, confidence. What do you think, Mimi?
I think I mentioned earlier about track record. It's very, very important to assess the progress of somebody and the promises that they are making based on their past achievements and their past failures as well. Let's take, for example, the recent scandal of finding our laptops for the children being sold in Uganda. These are laptops we were promised in 2013. So is it a failure on the part of William Ruto, who's vying in this point? Is it the fault of Raila Amolo Odinga, who was supposed to be the official opposition until he wasn't? Is it the fault of the quiet people who are now vying now, like Wajakoya and Waihiga, Maure? Whose fault is it? And what was supposed to be the reaction at that point, even before we found out that the laptops had crossed the border? That's a track record issue. That's an integrity issue. That's an accountability issue. And if we have questions of accountability and transparency, what she's mentioning, Chapter 10, with regard to all these other candidates, then we have to pick what, based on a discussion that Annabelle and I had earlier with one of our seniors, the lesser evil, because we only have 4 candidates to pick from. And I do agree, it would have been nice to have all 4 candidates on the same platform.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to hold you a little bit. We have the DP, Dr. William Ruto, kind of speaking to the press right now as he prepares to come into the debate. So I think we'll listen to him. So the technical team can turn that on briefly, and then after that you will give us signal. Let's listen to the DP and hear what he has to say, especially now that he has arrived at the debate.
Katika muungano wa Kenya Kwanza.
Pengine kwa kauli ambayo anaweza kuitumia kuweza kumalizia kwa yule hasla ambaye anatizama, anatarajia nini sasa hivi kutoka kwa kiongozi wake?
Anatarajia kujua ni vipi yeye ataweza kuweka chakula katika meza. Ni vipi mtoto wake anaweza kupata ajira. Ni vipi masomo yake ya watoto wake itashughulikiwa. Ni vipi kilimo kitashughulikiwa na serikali inayokuja. Na ni vipi anaweza kuhakikisha kwamba ako na matibabu, na ni mpango gani tulionayo kumshughulikia ili aweze kupata matibabu bila matatizo. Naamini kwamba haya ni baadhi ya mambo Wakenya wanangojea.
Naam, kila laheri katika mjadala. Naam, naibu wa rais William Samoei Ruto, daktari, akisema kwamba katika siku ya leo ashazungumza mengi katika kampeni Joagio, lakini ana fursa ya kipekee kuweza kuyachanganua kwa utaratibu katika mjadala. Hivyo basi ameandamana watu wawili ambao ni muhimu sana katika safari yake.
Oh yeah, he's going off. I think I can see a different signal. Great. We are trying to coordinate here to make sure that we don't miss any of the big action. I have some wonderful panelists here. Annabelle Joki, who is vying for Kabete parliamentary seat over here. My friend Bimi Adrin, an advocate, a lawyer, and has been on this panel before. And my friend Kiriba Karaoke, an advocate as well, and we are talking about, I think before we decided to give the DP an opportunity, just to hear what he's saying. The journalists have received him, and they're asking him, a couple of questions. So I'm sure you've heard what is going on. So we have a very short, a few minutes, just to kind of like look at some of the issues. What are our expectations about this debate? What should this debate be about? And I'm going to give you, maybe we'll start with Karaoke, because Annabelle was the last to speak. Tell us what you think the big issues, as soon as the DP steps on that podium. Hopefully the other candidate, Honorable Raila, will show up. As soon as they step there, what do you want them to begin to address?
I think for me, primarily, an entry point would be an absolute confirmation from each particular candidate that they will uphold, respect the outcome of their particular election.
Okay.
That they will not actually cede to the point where they will take us back to the dark days, which we actually swore never to go back to. For me, that is a primary entry point from where I sit.
Okay. Absolutely. So that's the issue of, first of all, they must acknowledge that whatever the outcome of the election, they are willing to accept that outcome. Maybe?
To build up on that, to an undertaking to uphold the rule of law and the interests of the people, the will of the people, because for too long we've been put in the back seat and we've been watching them drive this bus off the cliff. We need them to really listen to the will of the people, answer those questions honestly, that we may make, very good decisions for ourselves in terms of representation.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so that's the, put the people first.
Yes.
What else do you want them to begin to address right away?
I would like to hear the how of the financing element of all of this promises, but I also would want a commitment that he will see the implementation of his manifesto through to the end.
Okay.
Because you can tell from the forward of the manifesto to the very end that William Ruto has a sound understanding of what it is that is ailing the Kenyan people. But it is one thing to have a sound understanding. It is another thing to have a proposed solution. And then it is another thing altogether to implement your proposed solutions, because the implementation is what will lead to the betterment of the lives of the Kenyan people. But even as you're telling us about the implementation, we also need to address the financing element, because the reality is whoever ends up in State House, whether, whichever of the four candidates, has a Herculean task ahead of them. We're actually in a pit. And getting out of this pit is going to take us a bit more time than Kenyans actually realize.
Absolutely, absolutely. So the whole issue of, I'm sure, with this kind of a debate, I think there's going to be pressure on, the two candidates to really give quick answers. I think Kenyans are very impatient. Right now, we want somebody to tell us how they're going to fix our problems, all right? So you've said, first of all, they must absolutely, state where they stand in terms of election outcome. You want the people forward. You want very practical, answers to the implementation framework. You don't want empty promises. Now, so apart from the economy, what are the other issues that you really would like to make sure these guys address? And we hope the journalists asking the questions must bring to the fore before, otherwise the debate will probably, for you, Bwana Karaoke, Kiriba, what are some of the things, what are one thing that must not be missed out in this debate by the end of this debate?
I think for me, there has been a very great progress as far as protection of human rights is concerned in this country. The biggest challenge we've had previously is the aspect of government statement that there's progressive realization of the same. And one of the key rights that need to be addressed are rights under Article 43, which we're talking about high sustainable standard of health. We're talking about the right to access to land and housing as a right. We're talking about the right to food, because how do you have high sustainable standards of health without actually having access to basic nutrition? So this particular contestants, these particular presidential candidates must address themselves to Now that we have gotten this far, and I think we've seen a minimal attempt, ideally in the Azimio manifesto, talking about Azimio la kina mama, trying to address the question of reaching and addressing gender parity, gender rights, but particularly bringing the women to the fore as far as economic regeneration is concerned. But there has been no intentional, strategic address of that particular aspect of the realization of these rights.
Okay.
So for me, I'd like for them to address themselves to the why has the previous regime, this one and the regime past, failed to address themselves to those particular rights and implementing clear strategy for setting them apart as unequivocal rights that actually have to be realized by this particular government, and what is their strategy as far as addressing those particular gaps is concerned.
Okay, very good. Okay, so for you, Mimi, you know, you are an advocate, and I know you're a family lawyer.
Yeah.
And maybe I will ask you, because you see, do you think these guys are going to address ourselves to that sticking issue? You know, the family. The family has always kind of like not been on the forefront in this debate.
Yeah.
Is that something that you're interested in, or is there something else that you think should? Where do you stand? What's the one thing these guys must really address themselves to?
You know, you've really like gotten me right there. My key interests in this debate would be to hear, you know, he's talked about fundamental rights of the person, housing, housing is shelter, healthcare. When you read the Azimio manifesto, he talks about Baba care. I would have loved, you know, I want him to come on so that he can tell us more about Baba care, because Baba care touches on the family. He's talking about 6,000 shillings, I'd say a stipend per family. All right. He's talking about universal health care. So people need to understand, why are you talking about universal health care when we had a universal health plan prior? And, you know, like he said, what was the failure of the previous plan when now we have NHIF that's covering, you know, a myriad of not just illnesses, but also medical procedures. We're talking about housing. You know, we were comparing manifestos, you know, with Mheshimiwa here, and we were talking about how the different manifestos, like he said, it's like a copy-paste, basically.
Yes.
But you can see the strength of Raila is really industrialization. And the strength of, you know, Bill is he's tapping into the heart of the person. So whereas Raila is talking about housing for the family, he's talking about construction, because that's the heart of who he is. And whereas that manifesto is talking about housing, it's actually touching on the real aspect of putting shelter. So we need to weigh the options, and I would love to hear, how do you back the institution of family? How do you protect these basic rights? They are basic rights, like he said. It's the most basic level of family. It's the most basic level of the person. How do you protect, you know, education for the child? We're talking about free education, really, free in quotes. We've not had it free. It's getting more and more expensive. I would love to hear them address the issue of this, because if I'm giving you 6,000 shillings, that does not cover school fees, it doesn't cover uniforms, it doesn't cover books. With the high economy, things are getting more and more expensive. How are you going to mitigate these needs for your people?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I think I would like to ask Annabelle to speak to the issue of education. Remember, you're going to be, you know, once you're successful, you're going to be the representative for Kabete people. Education, CBC. I'm sure this is something that perhaps is part of your, you know, your campaign. You know, you have an answer there, because maybe a few people have already asked you, you know, what are you going to do for us? Before the end of this year, we're going to have the first class of grade 6 graduates going to lower secondary. Okay, is that grade 6?
Yes, grade 6 to junior high.
Yeah, junior high. Yeah, junior high. So we're going to have the first tranche of junior high, and I mean to understand they are like 1.5 million. So way more than the capacity of the secondary schools that we have across the board. So Mheshimiwa to be, where do you stand on that issue? And what do you think the president, whoever will be the president, if you get elected, you have one of those guys as your president.
Yes.
And maybe you have a position. What's your position right now?
On the issue of education, one, when it comes to CBC, I have a problem with it. yes, it is good in the sense that it has made learning very practical. And yes, it is good because it is pushing parents to bond with their children, because 3/4 of the time when those children are doing this homework, there has to be an adult supervising, okay? But the problem now, still going back to this homework, when you look at the materials that are needed to execute this homework, they may be readily available in Nairobi.
Right.
They may be readily available in Kiambu, perhaps in Nakuru, maybe even Mombasa. But are they readily available in Kitui?
Okay.
Are they readily available in Kinango, in Kwale County? Are they readily available in Mandera, in Marsabit? So we are compounding the inequality that we already had in our education system. Number two, you've now talked about the transition. Now, initially parents had been told that provision will be made for this grade 6 to junior high children to continue being accommodated in the primary schools. And then after a while they were told, no, they will transition to high school. Now, I am not a parent, but if I was one, I would be very concerned. Why? You want to mix a pre-teen with people who are already teenagers. There are different stages of development. There's a risk of this younger child being exposed to things that they are not yet ready for.
Okay.
There's in terms of emotionally, mentally, and even physically.
Okay.
So at the point of our education ministry rolling out CBC, why hadn't this provision been made beforehand? Why haven't parliamentarians called our respective officials from the Ministry of Education to book? Because they are failing.
Okay.
And we are also risking our children being in a quagmire. Now, what would I want to address? When it comes to education, we need to talk about equitable distribution of resources.
Okay.
In the sense of distribution based on your needs, not a blanket distribution, because blanket distribution still leaves gaps.
Okay.
The needs of children in Nairobi County are not the needs of children in Siaya County. So whatever allocations we're giving, whether it's financial, whether it's in distribution of learning materials, it needs to respond to the people's needs.
Okay. It's true. We're going to have trouble. Once it comes to education, you're going to see a lot of a lot of debates around that, because I think implementing something, especially for the first time, that's definitely going to be is going to be a real issue. I don't know whether we will be able to transition. Do you see like it will be rolled out successfully? Do you trust? Maybe that's the question. Do you trust the current actors? We have Professor Magoha is the head of the Ministry of Education, and of course the current president has been committed, as far as I can tell. And of course, there are institutions that have state officers that are working very, very hard. Do you see the trouble? She says that inequality, that inequality problem is going to be amplified. Do you see that happening with this education thing?
I do, and I think it's going to be a bunch of knee-jerk reactions, because we're very good at knee-jerk reactions and very emotive amendments to existing law. I do foresee a situation where we're going to have a lot of parents beginning again to question why we have this program in place as opposed to what was there before. Because if it's not broken, why fix it? And that's the real issue that we're having here. I don't know what I think my brother's going to roll out a bunch of really deep sentiments.
Absolutely.
Right here.
I think one of the biggest affronts to human rights has always been systematic exclusion, where the state owes you an obligation, but then they, either by intent or by accident,
by omission,
assume a role that is non-committal in terms of what they ought to deliver. And right now, that is the biggest challenge, that we have a system that is already rolling, that favors those who have the capacity to access that particular system. There has been very little institutional capacity strengthening around provision of this particular curriculum. There's been very little structural, infrastructural improvements that would actually facilitate the same. So the biggest challenge for me is to bring all these particular actors, of course the service providers, the children who are actually the ones who are the recipients of this particular engagement, to that level where they can actually all equitably access the right to education, regardless of their social status.
And it's what you've said, equitably, because we have to learn the difference between equity and equal.
Yes.
What we've been doing is equal and not equitable.
Right.
Not every county, not every school requires equal. We need to really roll out the equitable aspect of things. If this school needs something different, the Ministry of Education with its stakeholders needs to make sure that they get what they need and not what the country thinks every school should have.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I'm informed that the whole brigade of the UDA are already very much ready with their candidate, presidential candidate, Dr. William Ruto, is already very much waiting and ready. I've seen them, seated at the coach, waiting to just roll. And so we just teasing out some of the issues we think these guys are going to be engaging on, and some of the questions they'll be asked. We think there is going to be an issue on education, and I'm sure we want answers for that. And then, of course, health. I think health is going to be another major subject. I think we have very little time before these guys go into the actual debate. So education, we know economy is going to be a big issue. Absolutely. Education, I think clearly there are real serious troubles. Health, the whole issue about, again, universal health and all that, I don't know what they are going to say. Final, one of the things that you'd like to really, like, if these guys don't mention this thing, I think I'm going to be disappointed. Annabelle.
Agriculture.
Agriculture.
If they do not talk about agriculture, I am going to be a very upset human being, because as we're speaking, an average of 2.5 million to 3 million Kenyans are at risk of dying due to hunger.
Yes.
Globally, every 3 seconds, a child dies due to hunger.
Yes.
We're talking about 10,000 children dying per day.
Okay.
And then we're talking about 2.5 to 3 million Kenyans. From 2003, when Kibaki was coming up with his economic recovery strategy, agriculture was highlighted to be one of the problems. This is what, 18, almost 19 years later, we're still talking about a food insecure Kenya. Let's not talk about Sessional Paper 10, which was talking about alleviating poverty, hunger, and sickness. You address agriculture, you actually stand a very good chance as Kenya to resolve those 3 issues that were highlighted in Sessional Paper 10. Because you have a food secure country, you're feeding your people, okay? You generate enough so that you have surplus for selling to the external market. You're putting money in your people's
I'm going to cut you short because we are running out of time.
Yes.
So agriculture for you, big time, must come on the debate.
Yes.
For you, Mimi, what must come on the debate?
Short and sweet, internal security. We cannot keep having, instances of women being murdered, issues of the police, there's that murder going on within the family setup of our security forces. We need to talk about the security of the nation internally. Okay. Whereas no one ever talks about the border issue, our biggest issue is within the borders.
Absolutely,
yeah.
Internal security.
Yes.
Bwana Kariuki, what is the one thing you'll be disappointed if you don't hear it on that table, on that debate?
For me, I think ultimately is institutional independence.
Okay.
Because if we had a responsible legislature, some of the quagmires that we're in currently would not be there. If we had a judiciary that is actually taking action against corruption intentionally, we would not be where we are as far as the general perception around government reaction to corruption is concerned.
Okay.
And finally, if we had an executive that we can hold to account, an executive that listens to the people, an executive that can be told no and will not throw their toys, I think we would be in a better place. So for me, I think institutional independence is the thing. Absolutely.
Institutional independence, I think that's a very important issue. And I think in the first set of the debate, I think the candidate, Honorable David Mauro, was put to task about the issue of corruption. Corruption is going to be a big issue. And I think, Kariuki, you think that independence of the various institutions may actually go a long way. I listened to an interview by BBC interviewed the Deputy President, I think 3-4 days ago, yes. And that's the same thing he said. He thinks that institutions have been weakened by poor funding, especially investigative arms, the DPP office, and then, of course, maybe Judiciary. We have seen Judiciary cry out for funds. So, ladies and gentlemen, two ladies and one gentleman and myself, I think we are here, we are saying this is a very, very important debate. We hope that these guys are going to address some of the issues that are sticking, the issues that Kenyans really care about, and we're going to see, we want those issues addressed. We hope that this is going to be a very serious debate. We hope that the other candidates will show up. So far, I think from the queues we have here, we haven't seen the other candidate. Honorable Raida hasn't shown up. He's not at the coach yet, unless somebody knows something different. But we hope he will come. We hope he will show up. Last time we had, Sakaja show up, Hon Sakaja show up late in a debate, and the Nairobi gubernatorial debate. So maybe miracles happen. So I'm going to give you each one final, chance to say what you wish for Kenya post after 9. We're going to have Kenya after 9. So what do you wish for Kenya after the 9th?
What I wish for Kenya after the 9th is 1, a peaceful and cohesive country, 2, a country that is committed towards alleviating poverty, hunger, and the economic crisis. For any Kenyan who is going to be watching that debate, for any Kenyan who is watching us now and planning to vote on the 9th, ask yourself what you want for yourself over the next 5 years, what you want for your child over the next 5 years and your family. And then as you're watching that debate, ask yourself which of the candidates is aligning themselves to the vision that you have for yourself over the next 5 years.
Absolutely. Mimi, what's your message after 9? What do you want to see?
Stability and cohesion.
All right.
I'd like to see a Kenya where people are coming together for their own common good. I'd like to see people holding their leaders to account. There's nothing that has ever stopped us from calling our leaders to barazas within our counties, within our wards, to question them on their progress. And in terms of stability, once you have economic stability, you've dealt with a lot of key issues of security, you've dealt with the family, there are various other things, The manifesto is built on stability. All the manifestos are built on stability. I would love to see us getting to a place where even if, 100 days, like you said, is a very short period of time, there are certain things that will have kicked off. At least that kicking off is what I'd like to see.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. For you, Karaoke, what do you hope to see after the 9th?
Well, I think 2 things. I'd like to first be invited by Annabelle to celebrate her election.
Yes.
So I think that's one thing. And I would not want to iterate what my learned colleagues have said, but I think what I would like for this country is to have that clear transition in terms of moving from a politics of whims, moving from a politics of emotions towards a politics of issues, and towards a very cohesive conversation on change of guard and change of ideas, because politics in general for me is a question of differences in opinions, differences in ideas that should build together. So for me, I think what I would want for this country is that transition towards a conversation that is more peace-building, more embracive of one another, and more growth-oriented. And that will actually set the stage for a sensible issue-based election in 2027. Because this one, in my opinion, and I could be wrong, and based also from the demeanor of the candidates as far as even their attitudes toward this debate is concerned, they do not feel that there would be any bearing as to the outcome, whether they show up or they don't. So that means the issues that are discussed here are not of that much importance to either of them, or do not have that much bearing. So for me, I think that transition would be what I would want for Kenya after this particular elections.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, as you follow this conversation, we are just, debating and doing a little bit of analysis, some of the things we want to see in this debate. We're going to take a short break, and then we'll come back to this, and then as we promised, we'll link you up to the main debate right from the broadcasting center for the presidential debate. And then after the debate is done, we'll come back and do a post-debate analysis. And that time we'll really have the actual issues. that have been, brought on the table. So we'll give our take for that. And so we take a short break. Don't go away. We're coming back shortly. And remember, the debate is coming live here on Elevate TV.
The Animal Kingdom.
My name is Apostle David Juma. This is Equip.
A man shows preparation to receive by exercising intentionality in giving.
Umepigwa vita, mwili imepigwa, imekaa umevunjwa like unasikia umevunjwa, yani hata kijaribu kuamka inakuwa ni hard.
The language of music is very powerful, so it's important that you be careful what you listen to.
I do not believe that politicians have any spiritual legal standing.
When God spoke, I thought ni mimi na feel hivyo ati.
If you're a lover of great music, then this is the place to be.
A woman out there who is trying to get into marriage.
Hii story ni ya biashara tu and the workplace environment. But above all, we are bringing in the hand of God at the workplace.
If God has said you are a winner, you are a winner.
Young people want names, titles. We need to stop and start.
What word would you give to the young upcoming artist?
Look, the pastor, the leader must grow.
The Spirit of the Lord brings on board is the ability to instruct.
I believe God is going to speak to your life and your marriage is going to take a new course.
Elevate TV, advancing kingdom lifestyle.
Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, so welcome back. We are here live on Elevate TV. We are bringing you the presidential debate. It's just about to start. I have a panel here of Mr. Karaoke Kiriba and Mimi Aldrin and Annabelle Jockey. She's a member of parliament. She's garnering for Kabete parliamentary seat. And so we want to take you to the debate proper from here. And so we'll come back after the debate is done to give a quick analysis. Thank you very much for staying tuned in. So over to the actual debate right from the presidential debate podium right now. So keep it Elevate TV, and we are lovely. We appreciate you being here on this particular show. Thank you.
That cheers, jeers, or any other form of noise is not permitted during the debate. The audience has also agreed to the request and requirement to maintain order and civility right through this debate.
This debate was to feature two leading presidential candidates, Raila Odinga of the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya Party and William Ruto of the United Democratic Alliance, UDA. We have, however, received written notification from the Raila Odinga campaign that he shall not be taking part in this debate.
Indeed, but in keeping with the traditions of the Joint Media Presidential Debates Initiative since 2013, the debate is on. And we now make one exception to permit the audience here in the auditorium to help us welcome Dr. William Ruto, the UDA presidential candidate, to the stage.
Your Excellency Deputy President, Honorable Ruto, thank you very much for honoring Kenyans with this appearance. We shall conduct a series of question and answer, and whose topics have already been shared with you. We'll give you 2 minutes to begin with your opening statement before we go to the main thrust of the questions tonight.
Thank you very much. William Ruto, a husband, to my dear wife Rachel, who is in this audience, a father, to my children who are also joining me this evening in this debate, the sitting Deputy President of Kenya, a presidential candidate in this election, and I have come here to participate in this debate because I have presented myself as a presidential candidate, knowing very well where our country is. We are a country that is faced with mounting challenges. We have a huge track record of what we have achieved, but there is tremendous opportunity out there for more to be achieved. I believe that this is a Mama Mboga moment. We have 5 million young people who are not working. We have 15 million Kenyans who today are blacklisted in CRB. We have 10 million citizens who have no access to credit in the micro and small enterprise sector. And I believe I am the candidate with a plan to be able to get Kenya to the next level.
Thank you, Honorable Ruto, for your opening statement. Let's get right into the first topic of discussion here tonight, and that is the cost of living, something that many Kenyans are concerned about tonight. At the moment, Honorable Ruto, we currently have 3 subsidies in place on fuel, on unga, on fertilizer, all aimed at dealing with the cost of living. Do you believe that subsidies are the way to go and are the right approach at this moment to deal with this issue?
I believe that subsidies can alleviate the problem to an extent, especially when we find ourselves in the situation where we are. My position is that we find ourselves at this port because there are certain things we didn't do right. We had a Big Four plan because we foresaw this situation. We were here in 2017. We decided then that it is proper to formulate a plan that included matters food security. If you look at the 4 pillars of the Big Four plan, one of them was agriculture and food security and nutrition. Unfortunately, that plan fell apart. It was actually sabotaged. So we find ourselves in this space because, one, we didn't capitalize our agricultural sector. We didn't provide, we actually removed the fertilizer subsidy program that existed, which we just reinstated, I think, 3 months ago. Why did we withdraw it in the first place? Because to deal with the cost of living, you just have to increase agricultural productivity. And to increase productivity, agricultural productivity, you need to do 3 things. Number 1, make sure farmers have access to inputs, fertilizer, seeds, pesticides. Make sure the farmers have the necessary capital to be able to do the farming. And 3, make sure they have access to markets that are not rigged. Unfortunately, we didn't do that. And that's why we find ourselves in the situation we're in. So that's why in our plan, as Kenya Kwanza, we have set out with clarity what we need to do. We have put in place a 30 billion revolving fund to make sure that farmers have access to inputs. We have added a 12 billion shilling expenditure on agricultural extension, because it's not just enough to have inputs. It's also important for farmers to use the latest information on how to get our farming right and increase the productivity of every farmer. And the statistics show, with access to fertilizer, with access to certified seed, with access to capital, a farmer who produces 5 bags can produce 15. So we can actually double, if not triple, our agricultural output. What that means is that the 2 million farmers who today are net importers of food themselves can actually produce surplus. And we can make sure that we have sufficient supply that ensures that the prices are reasonable for everybody. So the real solution to the cost of living, especially on matters food, because we all understand the biggest contributor to the high cost of living is the cost of food. The average expenditure of families is 52% of their income. In fact, poorer families spend between 60 and 65% of their income on food. So dealing with the cost of food significantly deals with the challenge of high cost of living.
Honorable Deputy President, if I may just interject, what you said today has also been said by you before. In the first term of your administration, you pledged the same, that you are going to deal with agriculture, you're going to support farmers, and that's when the first fertilizer subsidy was rolled in before it was embroiled in scandal. And you'd also promised the Galana Kulalu project. When you say today that the food security aspect of the Big Four agenda was sabotaged, what exactly do you mean? What failed in the Big Four agenda with regards to food security?
Precisely that. It was sabotaged.
By who and how?
Because you know as well as I do that we never got to implement that plan. Immediately, we changed course, and the whole Big Four plan was shelved. And we went on a tangent because of the handshake equation. We went to handshake, to BBI, and the rest is history. We didn't get the time to do what we had promised the people of Kenya to do. In fact, immediately thereafter, I tried, like has been tradition for me, to support my boss. And many times, I tried to push the Big Four plan to the extent that my boss, the president, asked me that he wanted to do things differently. And he requested that he wanted to assemble a different group of people to help him deliver on what he wanted to be the legacy of the fourth president. And unfortunately, the Big Four suffered a big blow because the whole of that program did not take place.
Galana Kulalu project, Honorable Deputy President, was launched during the first term. What happened? What went wrong? Why did it fail?
The Galana Kulalu project was conceived. In fact, what happened is the first 10,000, the pilot on the first 10,000 program took place. In fact, the first harvest of maize in that program came into being. And the recommendations from the trial on that project was we needed to build a dam because the water from the river was not sufficient to do the Galana Kulalu project. We needed to scale up now and do the dam so that the water that was available, because the soils research and the trials showed that the soils could actually support the production of maize and other cereals. Unfortunately, it didn't move from there because we didn't get the dam sorted. And you know that we had actually 57 dams that we would have wanted to do. Unfortunately, they didn't happen. They suffered.
So why didn't you
challenges.
do the dams, Honorable Deputy President? And the former ambassador of Israel to Kenya also said that they were facing frustration in supporting the Kenyan government on this. Why did you not do the dams? Why did you not go ahead with the implementation of the Galana Kulalu project?
The Galana Kulalu project, as I have told you, was part of a wider plan to make sure that we move our agricultural productivity from rain-fed to irrigation. And it was not just about Galana Kulalu, it was a series of other dams, including what we call the high Grand Fall dams that was supposed to feed into the lower part of the Tana. It was Lowat Dam in Turkana. It was Radat Dam in Baringo. There was a big plan around that was now supposed to roll into place with now our targeted, because our second term was targeted at agricultural productivity and food security. And we had now made it the deliverable for our second term. And as I have told you, our second term program ran into headwinds.
Honorable Ruto, just to continue to understand Galana Kulalu, because that was a big project that, had it have succeeded, might have solved quite a few of the issues we have with respect to food security. The Auditor General conducted a report and cited weaknesses in the contracting of it. First, that there was single sourcing, and that even the manner in which the contract itself was done, in terms of payments that were tied to the contractor. And so raising a number of issues around the manner in which the contract itself was put together, that then states that this was something that was going to fail anyway. And so what's your response to that with respect to the manner in which contracting is done in this country, particularly with Galana Kulalu, which is a big project under the first term of the Jubilee administration, of which you are a part?
I quite agree that issues were raised around the contract, and that is why the contract actually was shelved with a balance. It didn't go the full hog, because when those issues were identified, it led to the contract being stopped so that those issues could be addressed. But by the time it was getting there, already the trials had been done, the pivots had been set up, the first crop had been harvested, and we already had the template on what actually needed to be done, because the contract, the initial contract, was for the first 10,000 acres. The real contract was for the 1 million acres, which was really the target for food production. But as I have told you, that is not the only project we were looking at for food production. And let me also say that even without the implementation of the Galana Kulalu, supporting the farmers as they are today would still guarantee us a situation where we would not be in the situation we are in. Today, for the first time in Kenya, the price of unga has gone to 230 in some cases. It's never been that bad. I must say, as a former Minister for Agriculture, serving under President Kibaki, I am the minister who assembled the infrastructure that provide subsidy on fertilizer. And we saw an increase of 5 million bags of maize when we rolled that plan. When the fertilizer subsidy was cancelled 2 years ago, that is why we are where we are. We are not here because Galana failed. We are here because we didn't do what we needed to do with our farmers the way they are today. What Galana Kulalu was supposed to give us is actually that extra production that would even make it possible for Kenya to export. There is absolutely no reason why Kenya today is spending 12 billion shillings to import maize from Uganda or from Tanzania. We should be net exporters of maize, for example, but we are not. And the reason why we are not is because our agricultural sector is undercapitalized. We have removed the support that farmers always had. And that is why, for the first time, because of the things we didn't do, because of the removal of the fertilizer subsidy, for the first time, the price of unga has gone to 230.
Honorable Deputy President, you say that a lot was done in the first term, and that is why we got to a point where in 2017, we still had a rise in food prices?
In 2017, it was specifically because of drought. And for your information, the prices of flour, maize flour, went to 140. It didn't go to 230. That's the whole difference.
However, then,
even in the situation of drought in 2017, what the debate then was 2 kilogram packet of maize was retailing at 140. Today, it is retailing at 230 because compounded with the drought, we just did not produce as we should have produced because we didn't support the farmers the way we have always supported the farmers.
Honorable Ruto, I'd like to speak about another issue that is a contributing factor to the cost of living, and that is the high cost of fuel in the country. What do you propose to do with that? Because there's also a current subsidy in place for that. What do you think is the solution to the rising cost of fuel, which, as you know, drives the cost of a number of other products?
I think the first thing that we need to do is to look at the taxes, because 50% almost of the cost of fuel in Kenya is taxes. I think it's time, as a country, we looked at, I think there are 15 different taxes on fuel. And I think it's time we relooked at how else do we raise revenue.
Which taxes would you be proposing to remove from fuel, the cost of fuel?
I think majority of the taxes that are in that bracket, I think there are almost 15 different taxes that are there. I do not have the specifics, but those 15, I think we need to interrogate these 15 different taxes. Which ones can we put aside so that, like other countries, we can limit the taxation on fuel? Take, for example,
let me
VAT.
ask, yeah, let me yes, okay,
take, for example, VAT.
Correct.
I think we need to rethink taxation, VAT taxation on fuel. That was the latest inclusion of taxes on fuel. And I think it was very controversial.
Yeah, Honorable Ruto, VAT on petroleum products was indeed controversial. Let me take you back to 2013 when VAT was imposed on this as a condition by IMF. At the time, then Majority Leader Aden Duale said, and I quote, "The 181 members have been convinced by our party leader and our deputy party leader on the rationale of 8% VAT on petroleum products." He went on to say, 181 is a very big number and we will convince our members from the NASA side. So you, at this point in the year 2015, I believe, when this was passed, were pushing for 8% to be added on VAT. Today, you are saying you want to abolish VAT on petroleum products. Why should Kenyans believe you today?
Why wouldn't they? I mean, we live in a dynamic country, and it's only fools who don't change their mind. If you are in a situation where the price of fuel has gone to 160, I mean, it's time to think. I mean, when this VAT was imposed, then the price of fuel was under 100.
Honorable Ruto, when the VAT was imposed, it was at the time a condition by IMF when we were seeking a precautionary facility. Today we find ourselves in the exact same position with a third tranche of an IMF facility, and once again they are calling for the same issue that we are facing with VAT then is the same one we are facing now. And at the point, IMF has in fact said that we do not need to be removing taxes on petroleum products. So with an IMF facility already in place, are you then saying you are going to go back to the IMF and renegotiate the terms of that loan that is already in place regarding IMF VAT on fuel products?
What's wrong with negotiating with IMF? I think any reasonable government, looking at the situation where we are, looking at the cost of living, and how many Kenyans are every day sinking below the poverty line, I think it takes a courageous government to sit down with our development partners, and they are fairly reasonable people, and have a discussion. And I think they are, if not 8%, we need to renegotiate on some of the items that are outstanding. And apart from looking at that, there are other instruments that we can deploy. For example, we have the fuel subsidy fund. We need to think about how that fund is being used, how we are deploying it. Are we deploying it correctly? Is it giving us value? And what changes can be made? We need an open and frank conversation with our development partners who support us. And to the best of my knowledge, they are not unreasonable. They are reasonable people, and they can entertain a conversation on negotiating some of the terms that have been offered to us.
Honorable Ruto, I think that will take us into our second conversation tonight, and that is on the issue of national debt. And I'd like to pick up just where you left off. You say our partners are open to renegotiation. However, on the matter of renegotiating our debt, Honorable Ruto, you just last week in an interview with the international press said you will not be entertaining discussions around renegotiating our debt. In fact, with respect to your competitor who is not here with us today, when he brought up the issue, you in fact called his statement on that condescending and reckless. Mr. Deputy President, are you tonight changing your position and saying you will renegotiate and seek to restructure our debt?
Not at all. I still believe, as I stand here, that it is reckless for anybody to say we cannot pay our debts. I believe that we have what it takes to pay our debts. And mark you, what we were discussing about VAT is very different from negotiating our debts.
But it is tied to the IMF facility, which is a loan.
It's completely different.
How so?
What we cannot entertain as a country is a position that we cannot pay. We are in a position that we can't service our debt. We cannot. We need to go out there and renegotiate our debt. I think that would send the wrong signal. What I would do on matters to do with the debt, we have a plan as Kenya Kwanza on how to manage debt. Number one, we have said we will first slow down, put the brakes on borrowing. Number two, we will put brakes on unbudgeted projects. In fact, that is the biggest source of our problem. Projects that are not within the budget, so that we cannot keep our fiscal deficit at what we have committed, 5% or 5.9%. Number three, we need to raise our revenues. And I have said openly that we have areas that we believe that we can raise our revenue. For example, we collect 52% of all collectible VAT. Just by automation and computerization, we can actually raise 95% of all collectible VAT. That would give us an extra 450 billion Kenya shillings. And added on to that, if you raise that kind of VAT, you can equally raise from corporate tax an additional 200, maybe 150 billion shillings. So there is room to raise additional funding, additional revenue for us to manage our debt without necessarily going to say we're going to negotiate our debt.
So I hear you saying that our national debt as it stands today is manageable.
Our debt today is a challenge. We need to deal with it. We are not sitting pretty. We are living, if I may say, we are living beyond our means. And that is why I am saying that we should stop this borrowing spree. Let me give you, in our first term, we borrowed 2.2 trillion. From 2017, our handshake brothers have borrowed 4.2 trillion. That's what's the source of concern. And it's not a source of concern to me. It's a source of concern to Kenyans as well. And it's even a source of concern to our development partners. They are beginning to raise issues about our debt. And more so, the trajectory of continued borrowing. So that's why I'm saying our administration will first slow down on borrowing, remove unbudgeted projects, because that's the biggest incentive, and then go back to raising our own revenue.
Do you have figures that you are targeting? When you say remove unbudgeted projects, how much are we talking about? When you say slow down on borrowing, from what amount to what amount are you talking about?
When you look at our fiscal deficit, right, there are too many projects that are not that are not budgeted for. For example, the Uhuru Gardens Museum. You don't see it anywhere in government budgets, but it's been built. So these are the kind of projects.
Do you know how much?
That,
for example,
we've spent close to 15 billion in that project.
In the last financial year, Honorable Deputy President, do you know how much of unbudgeted projects we spent?
Actually, unbudgeted projects are in the region of 100 billion. Unbudgeted projects. And that is what is spiraling our borrowing. And I'm saying that our first, and that's why, if you go today to the website of the Ministry of Finance, you will hardly find any paperwork there. You will hardly find any, because there are too many projects that cannot be accounted for, that are being done without a budget line. If you look at the expenditure on contingency fund, which is supposed to spend only up to 5% of the budget, sometimes it goes to 50% of the budget. So that is where we need to apply the brakes. And we are saying clearly, we not only have a plan on slowing down on borrowing. We also have a plan on raising revenue in targeted areas, areas that would give us much more resources to run our budget, number one, and two, to also manage our repayment. And in that particular instance, you may want to know that almost 80% of all our borrowing is actually domestic, which means we are also hurting our own enterprises locally. Access to credit becomes a big challenge. We must think of how we must slow down on borrowing locally and see how we can externalize government borrowing. And it doesn't have to be borrowing. Some of the programs, we must get the stock exchange to take up some of the areas of raising revenue. The stock exchange is a wonderful instrument. We saw it when we were selling the shares of Safaricom. Safaricom was looking for 50 billion. They got 250 billion. It tells you there is a lot of money out there. If we used different instruments, how do we use the different instruments of raising capital for long-term investment using the instruments we have, revenue, and using the stock exchange? So these are avenues that are available for us to be able to take our development forward and minimize on borrowing.
Honorable Ruto, while we stay on the issue of national debt for a moment, for decades, the Treasury has refused to make public contracts that have been signed with some of our lenders like the Exim Bank of China or the China Development Bank. You've been part of a government that has refused to make this information public. Why?
Those contracts and agreements, in accordance with the Constitution, are public documents. And the public have a right to know and to have access to that information. The fact that that information is not being made public is against the Constitution. So, under
but yet,
the Kenya
Mr. Deputy
Kwanza
President,
administration,
you have not. This is something that you could do. You are the Deputy President of this republic. Is this not something you could do or make happen?
When you are Deputy President, I'm sorry you've not been one, you would understand to what extent you can do things. And let me give you an example. Many people did not see the mettle of Mwai Kibaki until he was president. When he became president, he made a sterling job of being president. All along, everybody thought he was a lackluster performer. I am undertaking to the people of Kenya that given a chance to be president, things will be different in Kenya.
So let me ask this just one more time. You are the sitting Deputy President of this. You say this should have happened constitutionally, but it did not. Was this not something that came up in cabinet meetings, that at least we've not seen you protest about this particular matter? Because debt transparency and debt, what we owe and who we are paying is something that taxpayers should know. So if you are saying this is something that should have happened but didn't, why would Kenyans believe you when you say that this is something you will do if elected president?
Because I have never been president before. This is the first time I am vying to be president. And this is the first time I will occupy the high office of president. This is when the buck will stop with me.
Are you saying, Mr. Deputy President, that in the last 9 years, you have sat in cabinet meetings and expressly said that you'd like the contracts details to be released to the public?
I will not tell you whatever discussions took place in cabinet, because
we are seeking to understand, Your Excellency,
because
is what role you played
in
making sure that the government that you serve is actually adhering to the Constitution and several court orders.
Whenever it was available for me to take a position, I have always taken a position. And I have taken many positions. Sometimes that did not look very popular, if you may. And I have taken very firm positions in cabinet. And I have taken very firm positions in the public. And I think people of Kenya know me not as a coward. They know that I take what I believe in, and I take positions. I am saying here that every contract signed by the government of Kenya is a public document, and it should be available to the public.
The question of the SGR contract was raised even in the first term of your administration. It has never been made public. Mr. Deputy President, you don't have any record, any public record of you saying that these contracts should be made public. Why?
You see, as Deputy President, there is so much that you can do. In fact, my role, my oath of office has 3-4 functions. Number one, I swear allegiance to the people of Kenya and to the Republic, to discharge every responsibility given to me by the Constitution and the law. And number 3, to advise whenever required. That's the language of the Constitution. Whenever required, the President on matters that he requires advice. And number 4 is to serve people equally and fairly. So I have discharged that responsibility to the best of my ability. And I have made my position in regard to the contracts very well known to the right officers. It is not a matter I would have wanted to take it in public for purposes of making sure that government is functional.
All right, I have just one last question on this before we move to our next topic of discussion, because you've informed us about, from what I understand, and you can correct me, Honorable Ruto, about the limited sort of powers of the Deputy President. Is that what you're saying in respect to making these contracts public? You said, and I quote, "I can only do so much as a Deputy President."
Absolutely.
Okay. However, in previous television interviews, you have stated that you and the President remain accountable for everything that has been done for this. So which is it, Mr. Deputy President? Are you responsible for not making these contracts public? Because you in the past have said that you and the President remain accountable and should be asked about everything that happens in this country.
Precisely, that's why you're asking me, and I have answered you. I have said clearly that to the extent that my duty as Deputy President is concerned, I have discharged my responsibility. I have given advice to my boss on many issues, including that particular issue. So I have given him my advice, enumerating very well that it is the constitutional position that every contract is made public. I have given that advice to the President as is required of me. So, but you know the buck stops with the boss.
Honorable Deputy President, let's now move to the next topic of our conversation this evening, and this will be on a matter of national security. You were recently in Elgeyo-Marakwet County, where you promised the people of Kerio Valley that you would do everything in your power to secure them. You've also been visiting other parts of this country, Marsabit, Baringo, Samburu, Laikipia, West Pokot. More than 300 people have died in the last 7 months alone in this country, killed by armed bandits. Livelihoods are lost. Children have not gone to school. Children have been killed. Kerio Valley residents have even petitioned the UN Secretary General, saying that their government has failed to provide them with security. In your manifesto, you say that security is a cornerstone of protecting people's livelihoods. Why has the government of Kenya, in which you've served as an assistant minister, as a minister, as a deputy president, been unable to secure the people of these counties?
I quite agree with the feeling of many Kenyans. In fact, it's yesterday. It's not even last week. It's yesterday. I was in Elgeyo-Marakwet, and one of the leaders there told us we have buried 114 people in that neighborhood. So it is indeed a live and serious matter. You have seen me in when we came into office in 2016. I called all the leaders from Baringo, Elgeyo-Marakwet, Pokot, Samburu, and we had a serious leaders meeting in my office in Karen. And because of that meeting, for about 3 years, we went round, we mobilized all the governors, and we provided National Police Reserve in all those areas. And the situation was under control. But when we came into the handshake arrangement, a false narrative, very unfortunate false narrative, was rolled out that, all these National Police Reservists in Elgeyo-Marakwet, in Baringo, in West Pokot, were actually a militia that William Ruto would use at some point. And all the National Police Reserve were withdrawn. A very reckless act. And with the withdrawal of the National Police Reserve, the situation went south. And that is why I was saying yesterday in Elgeyo-Marakwet that we will do whatever it takes. And today, there is a program to build security outposts. And I'm saying, whatever it takes, even if it means bringing the military and military installations to support the police in some of these areas. In fact, you just reminded me, yesterday I overflew a huge tract of land where 3 years ago I was standing there and it was all maize. Yesterday, they haven't planted there for the last 3 years because of insecurity. So insecurity is not only causing our children not to be in school, it is causing starvation, it is causing death. Yet, people want to treat it casually.
But Honorable
let me tell you, let me just allow
in the last 3 years, Mr. Deputy President, you have not spoken out about the issue in Kerio Valley. You have not said anything about the killings that have been taking place, like they told you, 150 people buried this year. You spoke about it only yesterday. Where have you been in the last 7
I have
months?
always been there. In fact, if you go and ask those people in those regions, I have always been present. We have buried many of those people with our own money. We've taken many of those people to hospital with our own money. I have deployed my personal resources to deal with that situation because I know it was a political it was a political agenda. You know, the withdrawal of the National Police Reserve was really an unfortunate act. But because it was intended to punish William Ruto, you know, never mind that many people lost their lives, is a real tragedy. But that is the nature of our politics in Kenya.
Honorable Ruto,
unfortunately.
Honorable Ruto, you're saying that was done to punish you?
What other explanation would you have? You go withdraw security personnel in the whole of that whole region, you know, you subject people to...
How would that punish you, Honorable Ruto?
Because I am the one who had led the whole, in fact, I am the one who had taken charge. In fact, I was there every 2 weeks in that region. I was there every 2 weeks. I am the one who mobilized the resources. I am the one who mobilized the security men, the identification of the National Police Service. And so it looked like it was
Ruto,
about me.
Understand.
It was never about me.
Did you mobilize those resources on a personal basis or as Deputy President?
As Deputy President.
So why would your government punish the Deputy President?
You live in Kenya, my good friends.
And I am failing to understand it, sir.
And you know...
Are you telling the people of Kerio Valley that 150 of them have been buried this year alone just because a government is punishing the Deputy President?
Not just that. The Kimwarer and the Arror dams were cancelled intentionally to punish my supporters. That's it.
We will come to that, sir. You, as the Deputy President, consume intelligence reports. Tell us, over the last 30 years, what is it that has led to this continuous cycle of violence in Kerio Valley, in Baringo, in Samburu, in West Pokot, even going as far as Marsabit County? What causes this, and what will you do, knowing the intelligence that you have?
The biggest contributor to the situation we have in those regions is competition for resources, competition for water, competition for pasture, general matters of education, and precisely the reason why we had a plan on Radat Dam to provide the water for the whole of that belt. Arror, Kimwarer, Lowat. These are dams that my thinking was, if we provide water in these areas, we can sufficiently roll out irrigation. For your information, that whole Kerio belt where people are fighting, it is a granary. We have the best mangoes from that region. We have very good soya that can be grown in that region. The only impediment is water, access to water. And there are enough rivers to be tapped. My solution to the whole of that region is twofold. Let us provide water for livestock. Let us provide water for irrigation. And let us get schools developed, as well as making sure that we provide road infrastructure. That's why we rolled out the road from Parbelo, cutting across that region, to come out on the other side in a place called Marich Pass, through Tot, through Chesongoch. And now there was also the road that was supposed to connect Kapedo from the other side of Turkana coming to Nakuru. Opening up that area is the solution. Opening up that area in terms of infrastructure and opening up that area in terms of water infrastructure will provide the solution. Unfortunately, there are people who don't see it that way.
So you say that the Arror Kimwarer Dam, you recently said that you are going to complete it should you be elected president.
Yes.
Why did it fail?
I will. Yes, I will. It didn't fail. It was meant to fail. I mean, let me tell you.
As the Deputy President, sorry, sir, to just interject, As a deputy president, and like I started by saying, you've been minister before, you've been an assistant minister, we are talking about violence that has been taking place for decades, not just in the term that you've been deputy president. So this is not about you being punished now, unless you're telling us that for a long time, there are people that have been scheming to punish William Ruto by killing the people of Kerio Valley.
That's not what I'm saying. I am saying we had a solution. We had close to 5,000 National Police Reserve. In fact, we'd even moved a step forward to provide armored vehicles to make sure that we can follow whoever these criminals are, right? We had a plan. Unfortunately, that plan was frustrated. And you know, the plan was, let's provide a National Police Reserve. Then, let us construct the roads. Then, let's provide water infrastructure. And then, let's provide school infrastructure. That way, you ease out people from that situation where they are today to a new environment where they appreciate education, they have food to eat, their animals have water and pasture, and then you can develop that region. In fact, in my mind, that's where the future of Kenya is, because we have huge tracts of land in that region.
Honorable
And the fact
Ruto.
that people have been fighting in that region forever doesn't mean that they should continue fighting.
Honorable
We should
Ruto.
find a solution.
Honorable Ruto, let's go back to the issue of water, and you've mentioned the Kimwarer and Arror dams. And you say that as well was cancelled to punish you?
That
Well,
was
some of the
cancelled
court
for
filings-
political reasons.
For political reasons. Well, some of the allegations that have been made, by the DPP in court is that payments were made contrary to the law. They were not processed through the consolidated fund. That in fact, this was all done to ensure that there were kickbacks, that the government made advance payments, including 11 billion shillings in excess of unnecessary debt to, this is what they're saying, which prosecutors say were to go to, friends and co-conspirators of this scheme. If this is what you allege, are you alleging tonight, Honorable Ruto, that there is a big conspiracy between the DPP, between the courts, and also politically with respect to the Arror and Kimwarer dams that are now in court?
For your information, Arror and Kimwarer was signed at the same time with other government projects, signed by the same companies, funded by the same financiers, and they were signed not with me, witnessed by the President of Kenya. So these are not projects that were cooked at night or in some dark corner, right? How come that the only projects that did not go through is Arror and Kimwarer? All the others went through. That's number one. Number two, today, the government of Kenya is in court because the contractor, with all those allegations that have been made, the contractor has gone to court to demand payment of another 12 billion shillings. I mean, that should concern everybody.
There are also
How
suspects
do you...
in court, Honorable Ruto.
Pardon?
There are also local suspects in court over the matter.
Forget about the court matter here. The contractors are in court in London, and the government of Kenya is already replying to the case in court. And they cannot afford to make it public because it's embarrassing. Why did the contractor not continue with the project? Because he was denied the land where to set up the dam. And that was an undertaking by the government of Kenya, that we're giving you a contract, we're going to give you land, we're going to give you this infrastructure for you to carry out, for you to build the dam. And the reason given then was that, the dam was going to be in a forest. How many dams are in the forest? We have Yamo Dam. We have Yamo Dam in the forest. We have many other dams in the forest. So I think we have to be honest with ourselves. And that's why I am looking forward to the day somebody will step forward and actually tell the country how will the government of Kenya lose 20 billion shillings that was supposed to build Arror and Kimwarer, and yet there is nothing on the ground. What was this? What was this sinister motive?
Do you believe money was lost?
I don't believe any money was lost. And even if money was lost, people should be taken to court.
But you said around 2019 that it was 7 billion shillings that was lost.
No,
and not
I
the
didn't say that.
21 that was being alleged by the DPP.
I didn't say that. Check my statement. I am very clear about what I said. I said 7 billion shillings was paid. Right? That's what I said. And for your information, I said that 7 billion shillings that was paid was actually insured. The reason we should be asking is, why hasn't the person, the company who insured that money, why haven't they been asked to pay? Because the company that insured that 7 billion is a well-connected company. That's why the demand letter has not been put to them.
So what you're alleging...
And you see, Kenyans will one day really marvel at what really happened in this Kimwarer and Arror Dam. You will be shocked.
Tell us what really happened, because what it sounds like is you're alleging the investigating authorities, the DPP, the courts. There are suspects in court at the time, including former Cabinet Secretary Rotich, who I believe was charged afresh a couple of months ago over this issue. If this is all politically instigated, are you then saying that all of these authorities, different arms of government, are conspiring against you, from investigators to the DPP to the courts, to punish you, Honorable Ruto?
Let me ask you. That matter has now been in court for 4 years. It has not moved an inch. It's been dancing. You know, this person, today you're being charged, tomorrow, no, remove this person, the next day, remove this person, the next day, change the charges, because somebody is actually waiting for another government to come and carry the shit, unfortunately. And that's what is going to happen. That's why that case has never moved an inch. Mention after mention, after story after story. I mean, surely, how can we lose 7 billion, another 12 billion that is going to be incurred by this government? And it's an act of political convenience.
You just said we didn't lose 7 billion.
No, I'm just saying, eventually we will. I mean, if it is not sorted out. And that's why I'm saying, when I come into office, I will make sure that the money is not lost. And I will make sure that the impediment imposed on this project, we will provide the land. The contractor will build the dam, and we will move ahead.
To conclude the matter of national security, I think we'll also touch on constitutional implementation here. Over the last 9 years, Deputy President, you have been chairing the Intergovernmental Budget and Economic Council. The Constitution establishes, under Article 204, the Equalization Fund, which was meant to fast-track development in some of these marginalized areas, the ones we've been talking about, and many others, to help them with water, roads, health, education projects. Why has this fund never been operationalized?
Two things. My chairmanship of the Intergovernmental Budget and Economic Council extends to a limit. The issue you have raised about Equalization Fund is actually in the ambit of the summit, which is chaired by somebody else, right? As chairman of the Intergovernmental Economic and Budget Council, in fact, governors listening to me today, they know that we did a perfect job, especially when it came to transfer of functions, a function that was supposed to take 3 years. We made sure that we worked day and night because we wanted to get devolution rooted and moving, we completed that exercise in a record 1 year instead of 3 years. We have since worked with county governments, and many of the governors will tell you that I have provided leadership as chair of the council on every matter, whether it was grants, whether it was matters to do with conditional grants, whether it was making sure that there is a balance between what goes to national government and what goes to county governments. The whole of that trajectory, whether the issues to do with settling matters with the former local government authorities, assets, liabilities, I have been working on that with many governors, and we have made tremendous progress, including the final one that we concluded the other day, where counties now, as entities, can borrow money. As entities, like Laikipia County is the first that is going to have the leverage to borrow money. So I have a track record on what I have done.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman of IBEC. Now let me ask the question to the Deputy President. Why has the Equalization Fund never been operationalized 12 years after the promulgation of the Constitution?
The
It has
Equalization
a 20-year
Fund,
window.
as Deputy President I can answer, the Equalization Fund, halfway through, there was a big argument between who will implement this Equalization Fund, because it was under the national government. The counties argued that because there are 14 listed counties to benefit from this fund, why don't we give this money to the counties? Then there was a problem of trying to get the regulations on how this fund would work out. And it dragged on the contestation as to, and some projects were implemented, some water projects were implemented, some road projects were implemented. But the argument continues to be who should. At some point, the law was actually changed to include counties beyond the 14. And that became another big argument. And I accept that we should have done better on the Equalization Fund. And that is why I have made a commitment in our manifesto that that Equalization Fund, whatever the balance of the time that is left, we will make sure that we devolve it to counties. In my belief, the counties are better placed to run that fund than the national government.
Thank you, Honorable Ruto. I'd like us to move to the next topic of discussion here tonight, and that is constitution and governance. 13 years since the adoption of the Constitution of Kenya 2010, citizens continue to complain about non-effective implementation and a weak culture of constitutionalism. Honorable Ruto, which part of the Constitution of Kenya do you think has not been implemented with fidelity, and why?
I think we should sort out the two-third gender rule. I think we owe it to the people of Kenya, and especially to the women of Kenya, that this part of the Constitution is implemented. I believe that we need to sort out certain matters to do with devolution, like the one I have said, the Equalization Fund. I think it was wrongly put under national government. It should go to the counties. I also believe that there are functions that should not have been made contingent or shared functions between the national government and the county government. Local authorities, regional authorities, for example. Those are functions that we should either agree to be managed by counties jointly or to be subsumed into county governments. If it is Kerio Valley, how do we split it so that the counties in the Kerio Valley develop, we have a Kerio Valley Development Authority. Should that be managed by the national government? I don't think so. I think it should be managed by the counties in the Kerio Valley. So these are some of the functions that I think we need to clarify. We need to complete the implementation of the Constitution. I have raised, for example, the matter of the Judiciary Fund. I think we have wasted too much time in implementing the Judiciary Fund. After I pushed so hard, this year, 1st of July, the Judiciary Fund was operationalized because I have been talking about it for the last year and a half. So these are some of the sections that I believe that we should be able to conclude the implementation of the Constitution.
Let's go back to the two-thirds gender principle. In your view, why did we fail in terms of getting this since 2010?
I think, speaking for myself, I have made a commitment, and I know it's doable, to make sure the two-thirds gender rule is realized. There are different proposals. There are proposals that require constitutional change. There are some that do not require constitutional change. And I have assembled a team of very competent constitutional lawyers to look at how we can have a framework in 90 days of our government, and within 1 year, make sure it is implemented. And it's not necessarily for purposes of the women of Kenya. It is for the benefit of everybody. The fact that we do not have as many women leaders is actually a negative for us. There is something we are losing. The women leadership component that is not in our arithmetic is actually taking away from us. I believe that having women leaders would actually enrich our governance and our leadership as a nation. And that's why, for example, when these matters came up in the BBI discussion, I vehemently opposed the fact that women were being removed from the National Assembly, where the substantive financial issues are being decided, and they were being relegated to the Senate. So I was wondering how a right that had been given to the women of Kenya in the National Assembly could be withdrawn and they are hoarded into the Senate. So that is my commitment to the women of Kenya.
Also, on the Judiciary Fund that you've mentioned, you said you will operationalize it. But the judiciary is by dint of the Constitution of Kenya independent. So what is this exactly that you will do that operationalizes this fund?
You see, independence can be undermined by financial resources. The reason why the judiciary has been raising this issue over and over is because, much as they have their independence, their financial requirements are still subject to other pieces of legislation, which is against the Constitution. The Judiciary Fund is supposed to draw resources directly from the Consolidated Fund. Once approved by Parliament, that should be it. And in fact, because of the push that I have had on the Judiciary Fund for the last 1.5 years, it was actually operationalized in June.
So you do have some influence, Honorable Ruto, within this government.
If you look at, I have been pushing in the public, because that's what I said. When I said I'm going to set up the Judiciary Fund, I think somebody decided to say, this fellow is pushing too hard. Let us implement this Judiciary Fund so that he loses this card. He cannot take it to the people of Kenya.
So you do have some influence.
We have achieved it anyway.
So you have some influence, Honorable Ruto? Because previously, in this conversation...
Of course I have influence.
But in this conversation previously, you have said there's limits to what the Deputy President can do.
I have influence nationally on pushing agendas. I may not have...
Such as disclosure of SGR
As Deputy President, I didn't push the Judiciary Fund as Deputy President. I pushed it as a leader.
Why couldn't you do that then for a number of the other issues that we have discussed here tonight that you have said you did not have influence over?
I have pushed back, for example, on the issue of the BBI. I pushed back heavily. And I deployed a lot of influence. And actually, by God's grace, we managed to stall it. Our competitors are saying they are going to go back to it immediately after the election. But I think it was a complete waste of resources, and it was actually not made in good faith, because a constitutional change that seeks to undermine the independence of the judiciary is a dangerous constitutional change. A constitutional change that seeks to subsume the executive and the legislature and take us back to where we were in the Nyayo days is actually taking us back, not taking us forward. And that is why I made my position very clear in the public domain.
Honorable Ruto, do you believe in the independence of the judiciary?
Pardon?
Do you believe in the independence of the judiciary?
I don't know how to answer you. In fact, if there is one person who has fought for the independence of the judiciary, it is William Ruto. I am the only person with a few of my friends who stood up to the so-called ombudsman that was supposed to be injected into the judiciary, appointed by the executive, to supervise the judiciary, something I totally disagree with.
You talk about you being the biggest defender. However, the administration which you have served since 2013 has been cited several times for disobeying court orders. Let me give you one example, or a few. Former Air Force commander waiting for 6 years to be restored to his rank and given 71 million shillings compensation. NYS service official injured in the line of duty, yet to receive 3.6 million shillings by the courts. There is a number of those, including the matter involving the swearing in of judges. This is an administration in which you sit. In fact, former Chief Justice David Maraga has often lamented the executive's disregard of court orders. You are the second in command of the executive and of the Republic of Kenya. What are your thoughts then around the independence of the judiciary, and why have there been so many court orders disobeyed under your watch as Deputy President?
Two things. I am an ardent believer in the independence of the judiciary. When the judiciary issued a ruling nullifying our election, I went out of my way to persuade my boss for us to go back and do the election again. Because much as we criticized that judgment, because we believed that we had won that election fair and square, but because of our commitment and belief in the judiciary, we still obeyed the dictates of the judiciary. That's one. You have raised incidences where, of course, judgments have been entered against government and they have not been sorted out. And I quite agree. And in fact, that was one area we identified even as we developed our manifesto. If you look at our manifesto, we have squarely identified that as an issue, that we cannot continue this situation where government leads in disobeying orders.
Honorable Ruto, yes, that's indeed a good matter for me to interject. Just hang on one second, Honorable Ruto. Yet you have sat in that administration which has defied court orders. We haven't heard you raise issue on that. And in fact, now that you brought up the 2017 Supreme Court petition, you were rather unhappy with the Supreme Court judges. You called them those 6 people. You called them Wakora. Does that demonstrate respect for the judiciary?
In fact, I had occasion to have a one-on-one with Maraga. And I told Maraga an incident when I first came into Parliament. I met Paul Muite, a seasoned lawyer and a legislator, and he told me this, which has really stuck in my mind. He told me, young man, when I first became a member of Parliament in 1997, 98 actually. So he told me, when you support a government, it also includes criticizing that government when it goes wrong. So part of supporting a system is pointing out when you think they are not doing the right thing.
Criticizing them is one thing, Honorable Ruto, but calling them wakora, which means conmen? Do you believe that the Supreme Court judges of 2017 were conmen and women?
I would want to understand in what context that wakora thing you have mentioned, because I have, if there is any respect for the judiciary, is to comply with the decision of the court. Did we comply with the decision of the court? Yes. We went back to the election.
But you haven't in many of the other court orders that we have cited here tonight.
We went back to the election. And the admission that the fact that there are so many outstanding issues and the fact that I have singled them out and they are part of what I intend to sort out is actually halfway the solution. I don't think if you look at the manifesto of our competitors, they have recognized that as an issue. I have recognized that as an issue because I believe in the independence of the judiciary. I believe government should lead from the front in obeying court orders. And in fact, we have said in our manifesto, if you read it clearly, it says we will look at all judgments that have been entered against government. And we will develop a mechanism to make sure that within 1 year, we comply with all judgments entered against government so that even as we drive the country to obey court orders, we lead as government from the front.
Let's talk about something else, Mr. Deputy President, and this is with regards to leadership and integrity. Your opponent, who did not turn up tonight, said he could not come to this debate because he did not want to face a man who has no regard for ethics, public morals, or shame. How do you respond to that?
Do you sincerely believe that that is the reason why he's not here? I don't think so. I don't think so. My competitor is not here because he doesn't have a plan. He doesn't have an agenda. He cannot articulate anything to the people of Kenya. That's why he's not here. Secondly, my competitor is not here because he doesn't want to answer difficult questions. You know, he's been part of this administration, the handshake administration, for the last 5 years. KEMS happened, and many other things happened. In fact, my competitor could not come here because he's not the real candidate. He's a project.
At this moment, Honorable Ruto, just one moment, just to remind our members of the audience that they agreed to abide by the rules of the debate, and that involves no cheers, no jeers, no noise. Honorable Ruto, I'm sorry I interrupted you. Please carry on.
Sorry. So, I mean, that's the reason. So these are just scapegoats. You know, he's dodging difficult questions. He doesn't want to answer. His allies, the handshake allies,
Mr. Deputy President, there are expectations that are laid out in the Constitution and in law with regards to the character and the values that a leader should have. Do you think when you go out in public campaigns and you use terms to describe your fellow leaders, that demonstrates you as somebody with great values, fit for leadership?
I have tremendous respect for all Kenyans and all Kenyan leaders. I have not in any way undermined the public standing of any leader or any person or any Kenyan for that matter. I have not called anybody washenzi. I have not called anybody takataka. I'm just a...
Kitendawili?
Huh?
Kitendawili?
I mean, is kitendawili an insult?
Uganga?
Huh? I think we have all come to understand what kitendawili means.
Mr. Deputy President, there's public perception that associates you with a rather good appetite for acquisition of property, particularly land. And this has been mentioned many times. Questionable acquisition of land, this has been said publicly, Taita Taveta, in Transmara, the former Vice President's house, the late Joseph Murumbi, and others. In fact, there was a conviction in court with regards to 100 acres of land that you were ordered to surrender back to its rightful owner and also pay some reparations. Does this public perception affect you?
For your information, that's why I am proposing in our manifesto to deal firmly and squarely, institutionally, with a fight against corruption. Because allegations are made, left, right, and center. Any piece of land that I have is legally acquired. In fact, I think we need to discuss the Muteshi land. You've talked about the 100 acres. I was a victim of fraudulent sellers of that land. What the court ordered me to do was to pay for the 3 years I had occupied the land. And they calculated and said the income from this land would be approximately 5 million shillings for 3 years. And that's what I paid. The people who sold the land to me were taken to court for fraudulently selling the piece of land to me. Those people are in court. The
Mr. Deputy President, my question was, all these allegations.
Taveta land issue.
There was that, there's a Taveta, there's Western Hotel, there's Transmara. As a person,
yes.
As a person, what does this make you feel when you hear that there's all this public perception about you and irregular acquisition of land?
You see, acquisition of property is a legitimate endeavor. How you acquire it, if it is legitimate, you've paid value for it, and I want to tell you, I have paid value for any property that I have. Maybe the whole story has, like everything else that has been said, and all manner of allegations have been raised about many people, you know. My competitor, Dominion land has been mentioned about him, Molasses land, so many other pieces of land. Does that make you guilty? Not at all. I think the presumption of innocence and the fact that I can stand up to scrutiny. And for your information, I am probably the politician in Kenya that has been audited, left, right, upside down, inside out, on any matter, you know? And maybe because I have raised my head beyond what many people think I should. If I was a quiet business person, I am sure I wouldn't attract the same kind of labeling that I've been subjected to.
How much is enough?
Enough is enough.
Mr. Deputy President. Mr. Deputy President, we'd like to conclude this conversation with the election preparation. We're just 2 weeks away to the August 9th general election. You've previously said that, yes, you are willing and ready to accept the outcome of the election. Are there any circumstances under which you will not accept the outcome of the election? For a minute.
Accepting the outcome of the election includes going to court if you have an issue with the results. That's accepting the outcome of the election. Okay, you say my competitor has won, I have a doubt, and I will go to court. Why I made that deliberate statement is because we have had a situation in Kenya where every other election we foment a crisis around refusing to accept the outcome of election. And it has cost us lives, property, and many other things. And I needed to be on record, and which I am, that I will accept the outcome of this election. I know that the people of Kenya will make a choice. If it is me, I will prepare to govern the country on day one. If it is not me, I will accept that my competitor has won. If I have any issue, I will go to court and accept the outcome of the court.
Honorable Ruto, we've come to the end of this conversation tonight. We would like to give you 2 minutes to give us your closing statement tonight.
I think it is very important for us to look at this election against what is the competition. Our competitors have run away from this debate in total contempt to the people of Kenya, because it's not William Ruto who is going to make this choice. It is the people of Kenya that we are speaking to. They have very little regard for the people of Kenya. They think the deep state is going to make the decision. They think that the system is going to make the decision. I want to tell the people of Kenya tonight that they are the ones who will make the decision on the 9th of August. Their vote is what will make the next government happen. And I want to encourage them to disregard the propaganda, the mobilization of chiefs and all these people and the provincial administration and the whole of this contempt and madharau, and tell them, tarehe 9 mwezi wa 8 wa Kenya, ninyi ndio mtaamua serikali ambayo inakuja. Na mimi nawaambia, serikali ya Kenya Kwanza itapunguza gharama ya maisha. Tutahakikisha kwamba watoto wetu milioni 5 wako na ajira. Tutahakikisha kwamba kila mmoja wetu anaweza kwenda hospitali na kuwe na bima ya afya, na tunaweza pia tutahakikisha kwamba kuna maji na watoto wetu wanasoma. Tuko na mpango. Tarehe 9 mwezi wa 8 waamuke, wapige kura, watengeneze serikali, tuende mbele pamoja.
Shukran sana, Mr. Deputy President. Honorable Dr. William Ruto, thank you for making the time for us tonight.
Thank you very much.
That's right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, and the viewers here in the audience, following this at home, and of course those here as well, we have to end it here for now. Our appreciation to Dr. William Ruto of the United Democratic Alliance for honoring voters with this duty to a public televised national debate. We thank you again.
And indeed, that marks the end of the 2022 Joint Media Presidential Debate Series. The next presidential debate shall come to you without fail, and inshallah. in July 2027, at a date to be announced by the Joint Media Presidential Debate Secretariat. We thank you for watching. My name is Eric Latif of Spice FM and KTN News.
And I'm Yvonne Okwara of Citizen Television. Good night.
Put in place a state-of-the-art health integrated information management system.
We'll roll out an economic stimulus and recovery program.
Ladies and gentlemen, that has been the presidential debate. As you have noticed, it's one candidate who showed up in this particular top-tier presidential debate. That is Honorable Dr. William Ruto, and he's, faced the questions. I don't know what you think about it, but I believe that you've heard for yourself the issues that have been put to him and the answers he's provided. That, I think, is a very, very important, affair. I don't know what you have to think about it. Now, we are just going to spend a few minutes, very, very few minutes, perhaps 10, 15 minutes here, as we also wind down on the set and close and give you time to go and sleep. But before you do, we'd like to just hear what your take is. We are live here. I'm looking at your comments on our Facebook page, Elevate TV Kenya. And I have still on the set here, gentleman, Bwana Karaoke. Mr. Karaoke is here. Perhaps, maybe, Mr. Karaoke, I can start with you. What's your overall observation about the debate? How did it go? Do you think the issues we had anticipated at the beginning were covered? And where do we go from here?
I think primarily is to address the fact that we had a presidential monologue as opposed to a presidential debate, where one candidate has been given a platform to actually address himself to what he tends to think is his best pitch as far as taking the reins of power in this country is concerned. What stood out strongly for me is that there was no clear-cut address of the failures and the lapses that he had been a part of in the previous regime, that is now the outgoing government.
Okay.
And what would be his clear-cut plan to address those particular lapses.
Okay.
I think the panelists also tried their best to hold him to task as far as the question of confidence and overall acceptability of his candidature from a context of Article 6 of the Constitutional Leadership and Integrity. And he was also quite dodgy and non-committal as far as that is concerned. But overall, I think we have had quite the interesting presidential monologue. And I think it's now up to Kenyans to actually determine what is the best way forward from a candidate perspective.
Okay. So before we say more, the Deputy President is actually giving his overall take and comment on the just concluded debate. So we would like to listen to that briefly, and then we'll come back and conclude from here. So let's take a break from here, from the LV TV studios, go back to the debate center, and then listen in, and then we come back.
Literally, from any discussion on matters corruption, matters conflict of interest, matters state capture, because they sponsor him. And everybody knows that he's a project. In fact, nobody knows who the real candidate is. Maybe when you people send the invitation, you didn't specify. I think there must have been a problem as to who you had invited to come to this debate, whether it was the real candidate or the project.
Well, also there was the appearance that was made by Mr. Waihiga Mwaure, and he actually debated and took issue with a number of the number of issues that have been there, and also presented his manifesto. What would you say about the other candidates that you're running with now that you've enumerated more about Raila Odinga?
Well, I did not listen to the discussion with Mwaure, so I don't want to really get into that. But I think the people of Kenya have a choice. I mean, I'm sure they've listened to him, they've listened to all the other candidates, and the people of Kenya will make an informed choice on the 9th of August.
Thank you very much, sir. That is UDA presidential candidate Dr. William Ruto saying that this time round he believes that he has articulated his issues, but he believes he would have been given more time to articulate now that he says that there are some issues that they believed that have not been asked. But he has described Raila Odinga, and he is not showing up for this debate, as running away from the real issues, running away from the debate, actually going as far as insisting that we as media might have sent the wrong invite, insisting that he is someone's project. But right now, I'll take it back to you, Joe, for the panel discussion and probably to get deeper into what Dr. William Ruto has said at this particular exit press conference.
Very well. I think you've listened to the feedback coming from the debate center at Catholic University, and I'm sure you've heard for yourself. And so here at Elevate TV, we want to thank you very much for having tuned in, and I'm sure you'll follow the debate. We believe that you've heard for yourself. You can make very, very informed decisions as far as who you think is the most qualified candidate to be the President of the Republic of Kenya. And we will just summarize over here, and we also want to, before I ask Mr. Kariuki to tell us what he thinks, I see a lot of people have been online. We still have a few people who are online. Kennedy Meriti, he says here, God bless you, Mr. DP Ruto. Matthew Odoyo was tuned in. We had David Kingola watching, and others, many other people. Ken Ngure was also watching. And I think you all have been, listening in. We are unable to quote all your comments, but there you are. So before we close, Bwana Kariuki, Kiriba, so perhaps maybe we can just summarize. What's your overall take? Has that persuaded you? Are you among the undecided votes? And has that persuaded you? Do you think, because we've listened to Honorable DP Ruto prosecute his matters, he has answered all the questions that were presented to him. Has it convinced you? Maybe that's the big question.
Well, I think to the extent of an elaboration of his plan, to an extent of having the lack of a benefit of an adversarial position or a response, I think he has done his best to articulate what his agenda is. From where I sit, he could have done a much better job to just bring out the concept of the economic models that he's talking about as far as bottom-up is concerned, which he tried to sum up in his closing argument around, this is what we want to do, a Kenyan government for Kenyans of all walks of life. So I think, save for the absence of an opposite view, when he's judged based on his own race, then I think he's done pretty well for himself as a Kenya Kwanza candidate, and it's up to the Kenyans to now determine whether that is the direction that they would like to go from a context. But one thing I think that stood out, and I mentioned when you asked what would be my overall 10 out of 10, is that he gave the commitment that we will respect the outcome, and if we don't respect the outcome, we will actually use the judicial means to pursue an alternative outcome, which for me I think is the most edgy question as far as this particular, because the key antagonists are the ones who are racing against each other, and we want that to come out strongly, that whatever direction Kenyans take this country, either candidate will actually be willing to accept the outcome, and if not, they will actually pursue the correct channels to get an alternative view. So for me, I think he did well for himself. We are just waiting to see on whether or not we'll have a joinder. Of course, we expect Baba to be Baba and make his own joinder tomorrow or the day after, but surely we should be hearing from him.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. So don't rule out Baba out of this conversation. Perhaps he will have his own, response from maybe from some theater, maybe a political rally. He will probably comment. So I think everyone is going to be looking out for what Honorable Raila Odinga will be saying. We know he was absent today, but yes, as my co-panelist here has said, that Dr. William Ruto has had his day, He has prosecuted matters. He has answered to the questions that were put before him. And it's up to you really to make up your mind and give him a rating. Perhaps, of course, if you switched places, you would understand it was a very hot seat. He was really pinned down on very, very pertinent issues across the board. And I think in my little summary here, he began by addressing the issue of agriculture. And I think the various agricultural projects, right from the agricultural projects down at the farm, I'm forgetting the name of that particular project, but yes, he gave an answer on the agriculture plan, health and water. Those are some of the issues he addressed himself to. And then, of course, the big issue of the cost of living. I know a lot of Kenyans wanted to hear if he is going to make one more promise in terms of the goodies, what he's going to do once elected if he becomes the president. Of course, there was a big debate on national debt. That I think we had anticipated that would take center stage, and it did. We also had the issue of security, which there was a lot of pushback, especially because security has affected Rift Valley largely, North Rift, and that's an area that the UDA candidate draws from in terms of following and his party. And then, of course, the issue of the Arror and Kimwarer Dam, that failed projects. A lot of issues unanswered. There were answers, but obviously, as you can tell, that was a very, very contentious question. And then, of course, governance, which he tried to address himself. And then, of course, finally, there was the issue of integrity. Questions about land matters, acquisitions, private acquisitions he made, and all the other issues that have been thrown in there. What is surprising, Bwana Kariuki, is that it wasn't like framed, the question of integrity particularly, it wasn't framed in terms of corruption. It was framed in terms of integrity. Do you think that was maybe a weakness on the part of the questioning process? It wasn't told, hey, everybody has said you're corrupt, what do you have to say about it? I think taking it to bringing it from the side of integrity perhaps got William Ruto off the hook or something.
Not necessarily. I strongly believe that we're in a time where systems are coined, because the law is subject to interpretation.
Right.
And a simple example is, I might need you to support me in terms of helping me clearly prove whether or not I have a degree.
All right.
But there's a specific system of the law that will allow you to say you have a degree, whether or not you have it.
Okay.
So provided you have substantiated from a legal perspective, then you have matched the context of integrity from a legal perspective.
Okay.
But when you talk about the question of integrity from a conscious perspective, that you now ask Gigi, you have done all these things in the past. Yes, there exists no clarity in terms of a very clear-cut conviction on corruption. There exists no situation or instance where you've been caught red-handed with your hand in the cookie jar.
Mm-hmm.
But from your own conscience perspective, do you strongly feel that you are a candidate that would be the best bet for this country as far as fighting corruption is concerned?
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I think I would applaud that line of questioning, because we move away from just the strict interpretation of law in terms of what are the key ingredients I need to satisfy to look as though I am. Because you see, if I give you a very simple example, the aspect of anti-corruption declaration, it is a simple affidavit, which you swear and sign, and you submit and say, I think in my opinion, in my well-reasoned opinion, I have integrity. I do not have any form of corruption. That is subject to question. How many times have we ever had a question of the withdrawal of an EACC approval? Zero. Because you see, it's pegged on your goodwill to tell us, okay, I don't feel like I am not corrupt and I'm not fit to hold public office. So that question is good for you to appeal to his conscience. Like, look, Honorable Deputy President, we understand that you, and his responses are quite clear. I have never been convicted. I have never served time in terms of corruption. All the land that I acquired, he even gave the example of the Weston Hotel where he said, I got the land from corrupt individuals. And the court directed that I pay this particular amount, which I have complied with. So from a question of integrity on a conscious perspective, do you feel that your conscience is clear to talk about tackling corruption, yet there's a perception that you're not the right fit as far as that is concerned. So I honestly think that line of questioning is important because we also need to strike that chord in this country where we move beyond what we think is correct, but also stand firm on what we believe to be correct. So that we don't say simply that I have abided by the law, insofar as I know that I am not satisfying the context of, because as the president of the country, he will have the obligation to uphold and defend the Constitution.
Right.
So from that standpoint, he must have the moral authority to be the guardian of the Constitution in this country. So I think that was a very correct line of questioning.
Absolutely, absolutely. So there you are. I believe that we have brought you this debate right in your house from Elevate TV. We felt that it was very, very important for us to dive into this debate. And because of time and the fact that we need to, close, the debate is over. I think you have enjoyed the conversation. It's been very insightful. I'm very grateful that my guests, agreed to come along and so that we can discuss these matters. So we're going to bring this to a close. We want to appreciate all of you that have been tuned in and watching and following the conversation. You make your decision. You have heard it from the stakeholders. I believe you have learned for yourself. So thank you very, very much indeed. We truly appreciate you here from Elevate TV, and it's been a pleasure to be your host today. And so from Peter Karaoke Kiriba, I think you want to say bye to our audience.
Thank you very much for having us, Gigi. I mean, I'm very grateful for having the opportunity to make the contribution, and I wish Kenya all the best. God bless Kenya, and may the country win after August 9th.
Absolutely. So may the country win after August 9th. God bless you so much. Here from Elevate TV. God bless you. Bye. See you another time. Thank you.
Put in place a state-of-the-art health integrated information management system.
We'll roll out an economic stimulus and recovery program